So this is our third session. This is Hinduism number 2. I've got to announce this for the video. So if you're watching, this is our third session of our series. Our first one was an introduction. That actual video is now available on EVC, eaglesview.church resources page. So you can go to that. Our second one will be up. We did not have audio with the video last week, so we've got to relink those, and then it will be up. But this is session 3, but we're doing our second part. This is Hinduism session number 2. So what we're going to do is, anytime we're on the second week of a particular religion, that's when we're going to really talk about more about how to engage them with the gospel. So we've got a great video, or I think it's a great video. It's an interview that I did with one of our global partners who's in India. He leads a ministry. He and his wife lead a ministry. His name is Raj. They lead a ministry called Impact India. It is an orphanage, a school, a church, and medical. It's all in a little area there in India, and so phenomenal ministry. And he was in town with us about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and so we're going to do an interview with him. I did an interview with him, and I asked him specifically some things that would relate to our class tonight. So as we get into Hinduism, again, we want to remind you, tonight we're going to talk about 6 pathways, is the way that one would achieve this process of moksha. So go ahead and go to the next one, the samsara. As we look at the samsara, this is the journey. If you get one thing about Hinduism, this is the one thing you want to really hold on to. So hold on to this graphic, because it really explains this process really well. So again, this is helping us understand the cycle of reincarnation. So you have birth, life, death, and rebirth, but notice this purple arrow is the end of the cycle. The whole purpose of Hinduism is that you reach the end of the cycle of reincarnation. And how do you do that? Well, that's what we're going to be looking at today through some of these specific pathways of Hinduism and ways to get out of the cycle. But these terms then, this is what governs actual, guys, you can just spread out. I know there's not enough for that whole group to sit at the same table, so just spread out a little bit. But this is what governs the cycle. So the things in the middle are specifically the things that govern the cycle. This is a review from last week, but if you don't get this, then this becomes really difficult to understand where Hinduism is going. So karma, which are the consequences of action. Not necessarily, we think often of karma as bad karma. But there's good karma and bad karma according to Hinduism. It's all based on your consequences. If there's any sense of morality within Hinduism, it comes from this term, from karma. Now the problem with Hinduism, in my opinion, is the fact that we don't know who discerns whether it's good or whether it's bad. It's only good if it leads you higher in the cycle of reincarnation. It's bad if it leads you lower in the cycle of reincarnation. So these philosophies begin to also help determine the understanding of morality as it relates to each of these philosophies and how you actually get from one place to the next. The other is your dharma. This is the reason with the caste system within Hinduism, it's not a big issue with the aspects of, let me think where I was going with that. It's not a big issue because what caste you're in, because your goal as a Hindu is to fulfill the roles and responsibilities of whatever caste you were born in this particular life. So your role is, in order to ascent in the cycle of reincarnation, you are to do good karma, good things, and you are to fulfill whatever dharma you have in your life. And this will help you ascent into the cycle of reincarnation. Fred asked a really great question earlier. So that question was, okay, but if you're Brahmin, you're at the highest caste, you're a priest, why do you really care where you step and where you place your feet? Because you shouldn't be fearful of stepping on your Uncle Tony because you're the highest caste. Well, that would make sense, and we're going to hear from Raj tonight that Brahmins really don't care if they offend people. But the issue with this is you don't know that you're going to stay Brahmin. Just because you're a Brahmin male doesn't mean your next step is moksha. It means you are at the place where you have to have achieved in order to achieve moksha, but you could stay a Brahmin male for multiple lifetimes, or you could de-escalate, descent into a Brahmin female, then a Kshatriya, or you could skip all the way back. If you do really bad karma, you could skip levels and go all the way down. It's chutes and ladders, folks. That's what we're dealing with here. Okay, so karma and dharma, those are the two major things that govern the cycle itself. But what is the cycle trying to achieve? These are the terms that are out here. Moksha, which is this release from the cycle, you will achieve moksha when your Atman, all of your individualism, has been deadened, released. You don't have any more individualism, and you have released all of your individualism into the Brahman, which is the essence of the universe. So the goal is to get rid of everything that's individualistic about you. That's the reason why a Brahmin, that's the reason why any Hindu is going to seek to achieve growth through this householder state, through the sannyasin, that you eventually go around naked, not wanting anything, you're not attached to anything. So that's what you want to achieve. You want to get rid of all of your individualism and access Brahman. And when you do that, you reach this place of moksha, which is the release from the cycle, which is the ultimate goal of Hinduism, to eventually get to the place where you released from the cycle. Now, any questions about that? I'm going over it the second time for some of you, but as you thought about it this week, are there any questions that really brought up? Miss Mary Johnson is asking a question. Well, we're going to discover that a little bit today, because they use their holidays to teach this process, but they're teaching this at home in essence, and going to temple and going to places to try to help them understand, look, this is what you're to do. You're to fulfill your dharma, which as a parent, having the dharma card in your back pocket is always nice, right? Oh, you want to be a grasshopper in your next life. Is that what you want to do? Because if you don't listen to what I'm saying, and there is a lot of familial pressure within Hinduism, a lot of familial pressure, women to females and men to men. So daughters-in-law get a lot of pressure placed on them as a result of that, because you need to fall in line. I had to do this as I grew up, and now you have to help me. Lynn Baker.
How does someone know their purpose or their duty? Does someone tell them? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, so yes, priest may help you understand your purpose and duty, but a lot of your purpose and duty is fulfilled in whatever caste you were in. So whatever caste you were born in, this becomes your realm of duty. Therefore, our Western mindset that we should strive and achieve is not really in the Hindu mindset. However, you have no greater percentages of higher education throughout the country as you do in India. So why do you have huge levels of higher education when, as you're going to hear tonight, 50% of the population is in the Shudra and Dalit caste? Raj is going to bring that out. I'd never heard that before, but that was really eye-opening to me. So where do you get your duty? It's mainly developed because of the caste that you were in. Good questions. Terry.
How could your purpose really be anything more than just purging your heart?
Well, that is the huge part of your purpose. But depending on which caste you're in gives you the ability what your law of diminishing returns would be. Your highest level is going to be a certain thing if that's your caste. But if not, the best thing you can do is live to the level of your caste. So it's not that you're shooting for Brahmin, but the best thing you can do in your individual life is to lose your individualism in whatever caste you're in so that you can rise above that level. Zach?
Do they have a belief or understanding to try to identify where they were in their past life?
So not that I have seen. So the question was, do they have anything within the religion that helps them identify what their past lives were? Even to the point, Zach, where there doesn't seem to be the sense of permanence of the soul. It's not as if the soul of an individual stays in that individual, even if they're in a different caste or life form. So there doesn't seem to be a permanence of the soul up and down this process. So the idea that they would know what their past lives were is really difficult to ascertain. Now we're going to see within Buddhism that Buddha at a particular point in his life, who was Hindu, touched the ground and saw all his previous lives because he was on that phase to move into moksha. So if it does happen, it seems to only happen when you're reaching that point. He says enlightenment, which is in essence the same thing as moksha, okay, to relate those two. All right, Roger?
I don't know if there's real, when I say logic behind it, it seems like with these different castes, that if there was a generational stop, for whatever reason, if a caste was like, the whole system would break down, how would you move into another caste, into that caste?
Mm-hmm.
There's nobody in that.
Yeah, I'm not following. I'm sorry. I'm trying. I didn't follow where. So you're saying that there's a
If all the
Brahmin?
if they did not have children,
Oh, okay.
wiped out, the whole system would break down.
Well, keep in mind, the caste for them becomes very individualistic, which is against the whole process, by the way. So it becomes very individualistic that it's all about whether they move up or they don't move up. The fact of whether they have children is really irrelevant. So it's not as if,
I thought you got put in your caste based on your family.
well, that just means that their particular lineage would cease. But keep in mind, they're going to come back in a different life form and they're not going to be in the same family unit. But if you're born into a family unit where your father is Brahmin, then you're going to be Brahmin. That's what determines. But if he doesn't have children, he's still Brahmin. He has no children who are Brahmin. Does that kind of make sense? A little bit. We can talk afterwards a little bit if it doesn't make sense. All right, last question, we're going to move on. Richard?
We have the warrior caste.
Yes, Kshatriya.
How do they equip an army if they don't have enough people in that caste?
Well, they will enlist people. They're the ruler caste.
Okay,
So they're the generals.
someone on lower,
Yeah, you're going to go get Shudras and Dalits to fulfill the army. That doesn't make them in the caste.
make them a warrior.
No, these are the Rajas, the ones who are in charge. Okay? All right, very good, great question. So again, I want to spend time on that because again, this is, if you get nothing else, you will have a greater understanding of Hinduism if you can really grasp where this is going and what this does. We are not going to spend a tremendous amount of time on these 6 philosophies because I want to spend the most of our time on what do we do with our faith as it relates to this. But you're going to have all the information to look at these 6 philosophies if you want to dive in a little bit deeper. But let me tell you what these 6 philosophies are. So it gives them here. The first one is Sankhya, eliminate physical and mental pains and receive liberation. So it's getting rid of pain. Over to the right, yoga, we're going to spend a little time in it, but it is a practice of meditation to get you to actually yoke yourself to a deity. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. Vaisheshika, science of logic and the futility of, and anybody remember what Maya is? This is the test pop quiz. False knowledge. Maya is anything that's false. Because again, it's setting up that anything that's Brahman is all this oneness of the universe. Anything that's Maya is false knowledge, which keeps you held out of what is true. All right. So Vaisheshika, Nyaya, a logical quest. So again, you've got logic a lot in these 3 and 4, Vaisheshika and Nyaya. Vedanta is very important. Number 5 down here, bottom left, explains the divine nature of soul, Maya, and creation. But Vedanta is where it brings the end of the Vedic text. So they kind of get rid of their scriptures and they get rid of the caste system. And the 2 reform movements of Jainism and Buddhism are going to emerge out of Vedanta. It's out of that particular philosophy as it developed. Jainism and Buddhism, Siddhartha Gautama and a guy named Mahavira who begins Jainism, these are the 2 who are kind of rising through and this particular philosophy seems to govern what they're going to do next. Because what did I say? True Jainism and true Buddhism, what kind of a religion is it? It's atheistic. There's no need for gods. So the reason there's no need for gods is because it rises out of this Vedantic system, which Vedanta means the end of the Vedas. So it totally gets rid of the scriptures and gets rid of the whole caste system. And then the last one is Mimamsa. So again, explains the Vedas are eternal and divine. So this is the same thing that happens in the Christian Reformation movement. After the Christian Reformation movement, it's draining a lot of Roman Catholicism out of the Roman Catholic Church. And what happens after that is you have a reformation within the Catholic Church that seeks to bring a lot of those things back. That's the same thing that happens with Mimamsa, because it now tries to reinvigorate the Vedic text and the caste system. And that's essentially where Hinduism is today. So it kind of got drained out with the Vedantics and then brings back in the Mimamsas. So let's go to you're going to have Sankhya. You can picture that. You're going to have all those information. So go to the next slide. So these are some of the things about Sankhya. But again, we're really not going to cover much of that. I do want to go to yoga. I do want to spend a little time on yoga. Now, once again, if you're watching the video, I want you to understand, I am not downplaying yoga. Some of my best friends do yoga. I actually do some yoga. I'm not saying you shouldn't stretch, okay? You shouldn't focus. You shouldn't even think about meditation within this. But the true understanding of yoga comes from the Hinduistic philosophy. And because what yoga means is to yoke, to link yourself to a deity, a particular deity. And how does one link themselves to a particular deity? It's through the process, through the pathway of yoga. So this is one of those philosophies. So there are 8 steps that take this. It teaches a dualism, and it asserts that one should yoke themselves to Brahman, the essence of the universe, or a particular deity. Now, in yoking yourself to this, or it teaches this idea of a dualism. What is a dualism? Somebody tell me, what do you think dualism means? What does dual mean? 2, okay? So this is 2 opposing ideas. But we have dualism within Christianity all over the place. What are some dualistic thoughts within Christianity? What?
Once saved, always saved.
Okay, well, that has 2 ideas. I wouldn't necessarily call that dualism, but I can see where we're going. What else? No, I'm definitely not talking about Calvinism. All right, 2 opposing ideas. How about flesh and spirit? Okay, what are some things that Jesus teaches? Light versus dark. 2 foundations. Okay, so there's dualism within almost all of our religions, but specifically here in Hinduism. 2 opposing ideas that bring 2 things together. All right, that bring opposing ideas together. So, sorry for being so vague. Your answers were all very good. You just weren't in my brain to try to figure it out. And nobody wants to be there, okay? That's a scary place to be. All right, here are the 8 steps, okay? The 8 steps of yoga in this process. It's going to be a couple of slides beyond that. There we go. But it is the best known in the Western world. But again, yoga means to yoke. So here are the 8 steps. First one, take vows against harming any living creatures and unchastity. So these vows, this is where the extreme passivism to harm nothing that's living. Well, when we get into Jainism, which we're not going to teach in this section, but Jainism goes to the extreme of not harming anything, to the point of sweeping the ground in front of you as you walk so that no living thing is harmed. Okay? Well, now with modern science, we understand there are all kinds of living organisms. Even when you sweep in front of you, you can't get all that stuff out. But it is to vow that you will not harm anything and you will be chaste. Number 2, to achieve internal control and calmness. So this is a part of many yoga classes. Breathe in through your mouth and out through your nose, okay? So you're trying to achieve a sense of calmness, and you're trying to get yourself to a place of focus on one particular thing or one particular object. All I can think about as I'm teaching this is Lamaze classes, okay? I don't think they put people through Lamaze classes anymore. I don't know that they do, but they certainly didn't go through the multiple classes that I went through as I'm holding the pillow for Jennifer and we're focusing forward to try our breathing, okay? That worked really well until it didn't. Okay, but that's a whole, I fainted during our second child, okay? I was not experiencing any pain, but I had been through this once and I knew what was happening and I went out, okay? So why is Randy on the floor with his head between his knees? Because he's a weakling, okay? That's why. All right, number 3, to practice bodily postures to achieve the aim of yoga. So here is Brandon Elliott, stand please, okay? Give me the warrior pose, there we go. I know you can do this, there we go. Warrior pose, come on. All right, there we go. I know you face me, like come on. Like this, all right, yeah, come on. Get in a squat, come on Brandon, we'll do that. All right, downward facing dog, sir. Could you do that? Okay, there we go. So see, we're doing this inside the worship center, so I'm clearly saying that it's okay to do yoga, but again, don't have a Hindu mindset when you're doing it. Breathing control is the next step. Control of the senses to shut out the outside world. So the idea is, again, to place yourself in the sense of oneness, to shut out everything else. Concentration on a singular object, achieving meditation at that point, and then seeking a trance to then become one with Brahman, the essence of the universe. So you see the process. You're trying to lose the individualism into the oneness of Brahman. Okay, so that is yoga, where we get with that. The next one that we see is Vaisheshika, and finally Mamamsa. So again, we're not going to spend a lot of time on those tonight because, again, I've got them in your notes. You can look at the things that are a part of this. And here's the honest truth. The more you study these, the more they don't make sense. Because I've really tried to go into each one of them and try to make more sense of it. And these bullet points that I've provided you make the most sense to me. But this gets very deep into the process of Hinduism, and it's probably deeper than you really want to go in that. When we look at modern Hinduism, there's 3 particular characters. William Carey is one who is the father of modern day missions. William Carey left England and went to India. He worked years and years and years for one single convert, but yet his heritage and everything that he stood for still stands the test of time in India even today, even though it's been attempted to shut out Christianity in multiple levels. But not only that, but we have, before William Carey, anybody remember what particular apostle went to India? Thomas. I was going Philip. I don't think so. Do what? No. Thomas's doubting led him to one of the toughest places in the world. And you're going to hear a story from Raj in just a few minutes of there's a church built upon the place where Thomas was actually speared to death. And again, great spiritual heritage in India. But William Carey is one of those people, Ram Mohan Roy, but specifically this last one, Mohandas Gandhi. Gandhi had huge impact upon the continent of the subcontinent of India. In 1944, when the Constitution of the Republic of India was written, it is what finally brought Dalits to actually being recognized as human beings. It was largely because of Gandhi and the movement that was taking place. Gandhi's extreme understanding of this principle of ahimsa, of extreme nonviolence, led to nonviolent protest, of which a young man named Martin Luther King Jr. picked those up and used what he learned from Gandhi. Gandhi actually studied in England and was a houseboy for an English family who was Christian. And here's what Gandhi said: if I saw believers in Jesus following the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, 6, and 7, I would become Christian. But because I don't see them living it out, I will remain Hindu. He lived in an English home. He valued the teachings of Jesus to a high degree. but he didn't see Christians living them out. And that is a great understanding of why the gospel transmitting and translating into a Hindu context is going to be something we cover. But that is one of my favorite thoughts about Gandhi. The last thing we'll do in any of our religions is to look at their actual holidays and when they observe those holidays. Now, one of the reasons why is because these are also great opportunities to engage neighbors and friends who are practicing Hindus. Because as you know a little bit about these holidays, you can engage in conversations about them. Now keep in mind, as we talk about how do we engage our neighbors, friends, co-workers with our faith, my favorite understanding of sharing my faith comes in 3 steps. Let me give you those even before I give you these holidays. It is listen. You listen to their story. Make this about them. Get to know them. And you are doing that by seeking to know a little bit about their faith so that you might have something to engage them upon with some limited knowledge that we have, and it will be limited. But the great thing about this is if you know something about it, you can ask questions into their faith to help them to get them to tell you their story. Things like, what particular caste is your family? How does being in that caste make you feel? What would it look like for you to rise to the next caste? How do you think you would do that? These are all great questions to get them talking about their particular faith, and knowing these particular holidays are going to help. So the first is listen to their story. The second is share your story. Now, why is your story important? Because you've gained an audience by listening to their story. Now it's an opportunity for you to share your story. Now, what's great about your testimony? Your testimony, they cannot refute. It is your testimony, your story of how your faith has engaged you. And by the way, don't just talk about when you were 7 years old and you accepted Christ, if that's your story. Talk about what Jesus is doing in your life today, okay? Your 7-year-old story is absolutely valid, and it should be part of your testimony. It's part of mine. But most importantly is, what am I sensing God doing in me today? And I will tell you, one of the greatest things you can do is look at a point in suffering in your life and what you've gone through, of which Jesus Christ has made a significant difference in walking through something that's difficult. That's the most relatable thing about your life and your testimony to somebody else, because they're likely going through suffering and some type of issue themselves. So it just is an instant connection. And the third thing is share Christ's story. So often we feel like we're done when we've listened to their story and shared our story. Listen, that doesn't mean that this is going to be one particular visit and you should cram all this in at once. It doesn't mean that you should do this in this order all the time. You may have a few minutes and the ground has already kind of been toiled because of something that's going on in their life, and you see an opportunity to share Christ's story, then do that. I'm not saying you do, this has to be in this sequence, but listen to their story, share your story, share Christ's story. This is a phenomenal way to share our faith with someone. All right, let's look at these Hindu holy days. What are they? The first one is called Holi, okay? Holi, H-O-L-I. Typically it happens in February and March. And when I say typical, because sometimes these run on lunar calendars, not solar calendars. Why does Ramadan always end up in a different month every year? Why can't those Muslims get their calendar together? It's because they don't run on a solar calendar, they run on a lunar calendar. It is hilarious to me. A great friend of mine named Jared. One year we were befriending the Buddhist temple over here, and we offered for one of their Buddhist festivals that we would come in and take away the trash after their big Buddhist festival. It was just something we were trying to engage their community. And their New Year is in April. He goes, well, that's stupid. New Year is January 1st. I said, there's a whole nother world out there, Jared. It's not necessarily all about you, okay? There are places in the world that observe things differently than you. Be quiet, because you may not be ready to hear that, okay? So sometimes these are running on a lunar calendar, which means that it moves throughout our solar calendar. So that's the reason February and or March. What does it do? It welcomes the spring. It's dedicated to the god Krishna, and it encourages pleasure, which again, if we remember the word that goes with pleasure, it is Kama. Okay, Kama. Second one is Diwali. We're going to have some other pictures of these in just a second. But Diwali is in November. So that's the one that's coming up the closest. No, there's one in October. But November, it's a festival of light. Interestingly enough, almost all religions have a festival of light. It's really interesting when you look at this. And almost all of them have a festival of souls, which that on our calendar is actually Halloween, or in the Hispanic calendar, Day of the Dead. But almost all religions have a place where you give homage to ancestors or to the dead, which is very interesting across religions. There seems to be, that is spread throughout. But Diwali is this festival of light, celebrating the new year in November. So it's November for Hinduism. It's connected to the consorts of Shiva and Kali, and then the female consort of, which is Kali and Lakshmi. So Diwali. And then Dussehra is in October. It celebrates what's called the Durga, which is a consort of Shiva, again, another consort. 9 days in October, and generally gifts are exchanged. So here you have some of these pictures that are with these. So there's a lot of fireworks, but really what you're seeing happen on this far left, that is actually an image that is set on fire. And so it's the idea of you're burning your past and you're burning your sin with that image that's on fire. Holy, did you show the picture of that one, Mike? Go back to that one. So how many of you have ever run a color run? Do you know what a color run is? Okay, that has homage back to this idea of holy, because they are selling all of these colored powders that they're throwing up. Now, doing a color run seems like the worst thing you could possibly do for your body. As you ingest and you can't breathe, you're probably coughing up color for days. That's all I can think about with this. But this colorful expression is holy. And then the other one that I mentioned again was Dussehra, a festival of, Dussehra. Diwali. Diwali has a W, but it's in November, so a festival of light. The other thing that you'll often see with Diwali is the light lanterns, where you light them and they rise. So you're going to see that a lot with this idea of Diwali. So again, there are some other holidays on the schedule, but these are major ones for that. Zach?
Are they celebrating these holidays like mixed in with other castes? Or are they separated?
Okay, I didn't hear one word. What did you say about the caste?
Are they celebrating the holidays together, or are they celebrating them within theirs?
They're almost always celebrating within their caste. Now, you might be in a large group and you might have a mixture, but what Raj is going to say in a little bit in the video describes this in a really, really wonderful way. In that, the whole idea, I'm just going to tell you one of the things. He says, and I didn't know this till he said this, in the village, the higher caste can live in the center, lower castes are on the outside. That's where you exist. And he's going to tell a story of a well in just a few minutes. So the idea is you want to somewhat stay separate and isolate yourself from the other caste. That's the reason, to Fred's question earlier about Brahmins. I mean, Brahmins don't really care about the other caste because they're at the top. And so they really do look down upon the other caste. Kshatriyas look down on these others. So it's kind of all the way down. Matter of fact, there is, and I don't have this image, but there's an image of the human body. I think Raj makes note of this. The head is Brahman. The shoulders are Kshatriyas. The midsection of the body is the Vaishyas. The legs are the Shudras, and the feet are the Dalits. So it's giving it in a place of almost an authority of the human body. This is what, if it's a picture of a god, it's how these castes exist. Okay, good questions. A couple other questions. Anything about that? We're going to kind of close close our look at Hinduism because I really want to get to this next portion, which is, okay, what do we do with our faith as it relates to Hinduism? Any other questions? All right, we're going to take, the break we're going to take is I'm going to have you watch this video. It's about 15 minutes, so bear with it, but it covers, yeah, I see you looking at your watch, Lynn Baker. I've got 53 minutes left, and we're going to finish a little bit early tonight. So this is, again, it's a video with Raj Kumar, and I want you to listen to some of the things. He's going to share not only how he engages Hindus, but he's going to share some great things, and I've got about 4 other points that I want to make about ways that we share. So take a moment. By the way, there's waters over here. Take a moment. Let's watch this video together. Do we have that ready?
So we also have within this caste system, the Dalits are considered as untouchables.
Okay.
So that means the high caste and the low caste cannot intersect or interact directly. The low caste people, Dalits, are untouchables, means you have to maintain certain distance from a high caste person. You cannot touch or accidentally run into them or even draw water from the same well in the village where a high caste person draws well from. So if it happened in my own experience. So when we went to draw water from a well, the high caste person came and threw the water pot, completely emptied the water from the pot because we are not allowed to draw water from that well. Or the untouchables are pushed off into the corner, onto the back of the village. You cannot live in the middle of the village because you belong to an untouchable caste.
Wow.
So there's that variation, and that seems to be, in the back of everyone's mind and still practiced in many instances.
So this is a great segue, especially for our Jesus and the Nations class that we're doing here at EVC. I want you to hear what Raj just said, and I want to make this connection for you. Raj, you told us a little bit earlier, and so whether it's in this particular part of the video or not, you told us that about 50% of the people are in the Shudra Dalit category, the very poor.
Yes, sir.
So that means that 50% of the people that you come in contact with in Hinduism are going to be a part of these lowest castes.
Yes.
Now, this is very, very intriguing. Did you just hear the story that Raj just shared? Does it sound very familiar to you? It sounds like John chapter 4 to me,
exactly.
when Jesus comes in contact with the Samaritan woman.
Yes, sir.
So this is a great story that would be a segue story that if you are developing a relationship with someone who is specifically in the Shudra or Dalit caste, and you discover that in the conversation, this would be a great story to share. So one of the processes we're going to be talking about is what we call DDM, or discussion-based discipleship method. That's something that we've been teaching here at EVC. Okay. And so if that's the context, the story of the woman at the well would be a phenomenal bridge story for Hindus.
It is.
And so that's the next segment that I'd like to ask Raj a few questions about. Raj, first of all, and again, we may get probably briefly, tell us how you came to know Jesus and started this ministry.
So, actually, I'm a 3rd generation minister of the gospel.
Wow.
But my grandparents were Hindus at one point, and they were serving at a Hindu temple, fully sold out, and they are very religious. Every day they would spend their day at the temple, serving, cleaning, decorating the idol, serving with the priest. So that was their normal life. And one fine day, my grandfather got ill, and he was trying to cry out to his gods, and he went to every temple, tried everything, and nothing seemed to have healed him. So he was so frustrated. It was at the end of his life, and the next door neighbor gave an invitation to come to the church. They said, you tried everything. Why don't you try Jesus? Why don't you come to the church and let pastor pray over you? And so my grandfather thought, okay, what else do I have to lose? I tried everything, and let me try Jesus. And my grandmother and grandfather went to church one night for an evening meeting, and the pastor prayed, and the Lord touched him, and the next day he got healed. And he began to experience something powerful and something change in his body. And then over the next few days, he began to receive healing, and he got healed. And it was like, wow, this is different. And this must be, that Jesus is true. So he began to slowly, come to church more regularly, and they stopped going to the temple. They stopped going to serve at the temples, and that made some people mad or upset. But they made a choice that Jesus is true living God, and He healed him and He saved him from death. So my grandfather and my grandmother made a decision to serve Jesus for the rest of their lives. And then we were all raised being introduced to Christ, and I came to know the Lord through my grandmother, who was an evangelist. They both walked miles to villages and shared the gospel with hundreds and thousands of people. And my grandmother, after my grandfather passed away, I had a chance to live and spend more time with my grandmother, who taught me how to pray and who taught me about Jesus and the gospel. And she even took me to some of her evangelism outreach programs, and it was incredible. And as a little boy, I grew really close to God. And when my father abandoned and left me and my mom, I had to go to a Christian orphanage. And so I spent most of my childhood at Christian orphanage, where I learned more about the Lord and became a serious and strong disciple of Christ. And I gave my life to the Lord, and God gave me an awesome opportunity to serve Him, and today to be a missionary to the land of India.
Well, now it makes a lot more sense why you have such a passion for orphans.
Yes.
Because you've experienced that.
Correct.
And what an amazing story. So Raj, I know that our Christian tradition holds that the Apostle Thomas came to India.
Yes.
Tell us what that story of Christian history is, and how that has equated to the church always being a part even of the early Indian culture.
Yes, that's so true, Pastor. In 52 AD, Apostle Thomas came to India. So as after Jesus ascended, the disciples went all over the world and took the gospel. So in the process, Apostle Thomas was led to come to India. He came to the bottom part of India, which is the state of Kerala. So he landed there. He started ministering to the people in Kerala. So the Christianity entered down in south and spread upward. So the closest states to the south got more evangelized, and gospel got, and churches were planted. And so as you go up, you see less and less of that, more persecution in the north. But in the south, there's more favor, there's more openness to the gospel, and there are more churches also. And so, yes, he did come, and he brought gospel to the land of India. And I personally saw where he was martyred.
Wow.
There's a state called Chennai where there's a tomb, there's a church there's a cross that's built over his tomb, and it seems that's where he was speared to death.
Okay.
So the anti-Christian elements there persecuted him, killed him, and they speared him to death right there in a state called Chennai down in south.
So going all the way back and understanding the beginnings of Christianity in India, and the Apostle Thomas going to Kerala and eventually being martyred by the spear, understanding the Christian history that comes into contact with Hinduism. The last thing I really want to talk with you about, Raj, is we mentioned John chapter 4 would be a great passage and great story to engage someone with the gospel who is Hindu.
Yes.
What are some other conversational ways, or how would you begin a conversation to share your faith with someone who is Hindu?
So, this is what I would say. Everyone has a story. Everyone has a problem or a need or a health issue. And the effective way right now, with all the persecution, the effective way that's been working for us is to start a one-on-one conversation, develop a friendship, or ask them about a need that we can pray for or a health issue. Many are open to prayer. They don't want to hear the gospel or accept Christ right away, but they are open to just being prayed for. They're like, would you please pray for this need or this situation? And that could be a potential startup for a great journey of faith. And so I would say, as you develop friendship, just ask if there's a need that you can pray for, because we tell them, hey, we have a God who answers prayers, who heals, or who gives us a breakthrough, or who solves a problem. And people of other faiths, especially Hindus, believe in miracles. They want a sign or a miracle before they can accept or believe in a God, especially in Jesus. They want to see a sign. They want to see a miracle. And so we know that our God works miracles. He's a miracle working God. He's a prayer answering God. So when we stand in the gap and pray for them and they experience a miracle, they are more prone to accepting Christ and coming to church because they want more of it. Hindus are seekers. They are seeking. They're going to all kinds of religious places, and all kinds of, mountaintops, rivers. They are seekers. They're trying to find an answer to the questions. But when we say, hey, Jesus came looking down for us, we don't have to go anywhere, pilgrimages, we don't have to dip in river, we don't go to a mountaintop. This Jesus came seeking for us. That changes their whole perspective and start wondering, I don't need to go to him because he came for me. I don't have to go and dip in river 7 times, or I don't have to go climb mountaintops or offer this and that, because Jesus came where I am, to my situation, to my problem, to my home, to have a relationship with me. And that begins to open their heart to want to know more about Jesus.
That's incredible. I want to conclude with simply this. What we're seeing is, and what Raj has just brought out, is this factor that all world religions, all of them, are seeking. They're seeking truth.
Yes.
They're seeking a way to make themselves one with a deity. They're seeking different actions that they work their way to this process. We see that in Islam through the 5 pillars. We see it in Hinduism, as Raj has talked about, with the desire to yoke yourself to a deity, which is yoga. We'll talk about that more in the class. But this whole idea of yoking yourself to a deity, seeking to live within the caste system, is a works-based understanding. We will see within Mormonism a work-based understanding, within Jehovah's Witnesses a work-based understanding, within Judaism keeping the law. In all of these religions, even Catholicism, we see the idea of keeping the sacraments. Any place we see people trying to do things in order to get in favor with a deity or with our God is an understanding of doing the dance in order to get the hug.
That's right.
And so what a great understanding of starting with an idea of asking somebody how you can pray for them. I've said this for years, but one question that I can ask people that they always are never resistant to, they are never resistant to this, is when I ask them, hey, I'm going to pray for you anyway. What can I pray specifically for you? That is a phenomenal bridge question to engage someone with where they're at. Because we know everybody's hurting. Everybody's gone through loss. Everybody has experiences that they're struggling with. And so what a great transitional statement. Thank you for that, Raj, because that's not just for Hinduism. That's in so many of our religions, which is something we'll be talking about. The other thing I want to make sure that you heard and that we bring out from what the conversation with Raj led us to is that in many places of the world, in most places of the world right now, that we would consider difficult places, persecuted places, Islam, Hinduism, places that have militant Buddhism, all of these areas, one of the great ways that God is working there is through miracles and through visions or dreams. And so we, as the Christian world, we need to pray that more and more people are experiencing God's power, because it is a transitional point for them to receive Christ. So great ways for us to think about and continue to pray. So this has been Jesus and the Nations with Raj Kumar. And Raj, we are so thankful for your time today and you helping us understand the culture in which you grew up in and that God saved you into his family from.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Randy. I appreciate the opportunity to come and have this discussion and share how God's touched my life and how God's transferred me from darkness into his marvelous marvelous light, and today has given me an opportunity to touch and impact so many lives and take the gospel to one of the most unreached nations on the earth, which is India. So thank you for the opportunity, and may God continue to bless EVC and the pastor and the pastor and the leadership of this house and all those who are watching this.
Thank you, Raj. By the way, how many people are in India today?
1.5 billion, close to 1.5 billion.
1.5 billion. So
Yes,
of the
sir.
8.5 billion people on the planet, 1.5 billion are in India.
Not just in India.
What an incredible way that we can pray
That's right.
and give and go and see what God wants to do with the nation and with the people of India. Thank you, Raj.
Absolutely. Thank you, Pastor.
There's no Christmas in the Miller household because he can't wrap anything up. Evidently, that's what's. There's nothing worse than watching yourself on video, okay? And by the way, Christina, we've got to get rid of those infant chairs. I look gargantuan in those chairs. It's like normal people can't sit in those chairs. All right. So again, just I think tremendous insight. I hate it when I can't remember something. It was going through my brain. So discussion discipleship method is what, and so if you're interested in that, I would love to know if you would like to learn that process, because I would love to teach it to you. I love to teach it to everybody that I meet. I taught it to our Honduras mission trip on the way because I had a captive audience and they couldn't get away from me. So I taught them DDM, and just a great way to use biblical stories to help people get understanding from their faith. Zach?
Would you say that most of the church planners that are Indian or people that are Christian in India, are they of the lower class, lower caste?
So what Zach has asked is, are most of the church planters in the lower caste? Simply by nature of the fact that 50% of the population in India are the two lowest castes, I would say likely yes. But here's what I can tell you. You and I will get to figure that out. Zach and I are heading to India in November to be a part of the next church planting graduation for over 750 new church planters that are going to be planted. So that's a great question that we will ask in India, Zach, because I really don't know the answer to that. All right, the last thing I really want us to focus on, again, some great tips in that. When he told that story about the well, can you just imagine telling that story and being able to say, you know, have you ever felt a time in your life where you came in contact with people from a different caste and you felt isolated or cast off from that particular group of people? I can almost guarantee you the answer is going to be yes. And then it is, could I share a story from the Bible with you about a woman who felt that same type of isolation? And then you tell the story of the Samaritan woman. That is DDM at its best in a situational process. So few things that I just want to bring out tonight to finish us up on. These are going to be really the doctrinal issues of our faith and how it relates to Hinduism. I mentioned that at the end there. We live in a world of works-based theologies, but we need to be very careful. The church I grew up, he's gone now. He went to the restroom. But my friend Alan, my best friend, is here, and we called ourselves. We felt like we lived in a works-based theology in the Baptist life, where. Here's what I mean by that. It is where you feel like, I mentioned it, you got to do the dance to get the hug. So it's church attendance, it's giving, it's being there whenever the doors are open. We can talk about other faiths and say, oh, look, they seem to be based on earning their salvation. Well, there was a long time in my life that I felt like I was earning my salvation. It brought me to the point when I was 13 years old where I had to come to the realization that I could not do this on my own. And it had to be totally on the power of Jesus Christ. That it was not about what I could do. Because I lived in a Baptist world where I was dealing with a work-based theology. Okay, so we can criticize others. We need to first look at the four fingers pointing back at us and realize it's real easy for us to slip into legalism and to a place where we've got to do all these things in order to get God's favor. That's not what we do. The significant difference of what we attempt to teach here is you have a life transformational relationship with Jesus Christ that is because he drew you, not because you were necessarily seeking him. He drew you, and at the point at which you became a believer in Jesus Christ, it's because of that faith that you want to do the good works that he's called you to do. It's not in order to get that faith that we do the good works. It's because he has changed our heart. And that's what we want to make and see in the significant difference, especially in these world faiths. Because always, as I mentioned to you last week, we talk about terms, the term sacrifice. Sacrifice in all other religions is something that the believer does that gives to the deity in order to receive something back. It is the life understanding of theology of the vending machine. I put in 50 cents or $1.25 today, and I get back a Coke, okay? But what's the point? I do these certain activities, I do these certain things, and if I do these things properly, the deity gives me back something, okay? Only in Christianity do we see that reversed, where the deity has sacrificed himself for us. In all other religions, it's that we do sacrifice in order to get the deity to do something for us. Even in our understanding of fasting, it is oftentimes reviewed, that's not a proper view of fasting, that we do fasting in order to kind of put pressure on the deity to look at all the things that I'm doing for you in hopes that he will do something for us. It's not the true understanding of fasting, but we can easily get ourselves to that. And we can easily do that in our church life. So it's understanding that we really want to come from. So the first thing that I have tonight is our God is personal. Psalm 59 verse 9 talks about this. But here's a key question to this issue. It is simply this. This is a key transitional question that you could start a conversation with the understanding that our God is personal. All the deities within Hinduism are impersonal. They do not relate to the individual. They are wholly different and wholly other. They don't have any sense of real intimate relationship with the penitent or the believer. But here's a great question. Do you have any sense of a personal relationship with the deity that you worship? To get into that understanding that our God is personal, that is something that we might want to ask to get us into that particular arena. The second is, how does our faith deal with humanity? Genesis 1:26 and 27, God made human beings in whose image? In his image. We are made in the image of God. That's not just people who believe in Jesus. All human beings are created in the image of God, which means that unlike the Brahmin priest who would look down on others, we want to treat everyone with humanity, not because they've earned it, but because they are made in Christ's image. Doesn't mean they possess Christ, but they are made in his image. And therefore, if that person is made in Christ's image, just like I am, it means that I'm going to relate to them as a human being, as someone who's equal to who I am. Great question that goes with that. Where does the characteristics of your Atman emanate from? So this is your individualism. Where does your individualism come from? If you can't relate to the deity and the deity's not personal and the deity has in essence become Brahman, then where does your Atman come from? Does it come from your humanity? Does it come from your previous life? But this gets you into the conversation about our humanity and what's the big issue with humanity is the next issue. It's sin. Sin, Romans 6:23, for the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life through Jesus Christ our Lord. The first part of that, the wages of sin equals death. What kind of death are we talking about? Spiritual death. Our sin has earned us death. In this aspect of Hinduism, my question would simply be, is there a concept of sin? And what creates sin? Where does sin come from? Is sin the karma of your actions? Who determines whether karma is good or bad? These are just questions. These are not gotcha questions where you have the answer and you're going to spring it on them. Evangelism doesn't work well that way because that only lives out of our arrogance, okay? Most people don't respond well to arrogance, okay? So the whole idea is you're wanting to engage. Keep in mind what Raj said. Hindus are seekers. Buddhists are seekers. Meet them at their area where they're seeking. Which again, if they're engaging, if they're experiencing suffering, this is a great place to listen to their story to the place at which they suffer. But here's the question. How do you know what's right and wrong based on Hinduism? It gets us to the question of sin. And then the final one, salvation. Where do we get our salvation from? John 8:32. What do you think it would be like to be set free in your lifetime? John 8:32 deals with our sense of freedom. You will be free indeed if you follow Christ. So this understanding of freedom is really what that whole aspect of moksha is all about. And so that question then is, what do you think it would look like if you were set free? And you could even use the term. If you had reached moksha in your lifetime, what do you think that would mean? They're probably not going to be able to conceptualize that. And so what's the next follow-up? Well, it is, would you like to experience freedom in your lifetime? Jesus offers this. Now, Jesus is recognized in the Hindu culture as a great teacher, but not the Son of God. As we're going to see, it's the same within Islam. A great teacher, but not the Son of God. But here's what Jesus says about himself. Again, we're not trying to gotcha. We're trying to use these opportunities to engage someone. But when Raj said that about this whole idea of not being able to draw water from the same well with someone who's from a higher caste, it just resonated with me, that story of the woman at the well. So there's some things that we could talk about and some things that we can engage people with discussions. Now, you may go, okay, now I've got this little bit of understanding of Hinduism. Now I'm going to go and do this with my friends. Again, what I would just say is engage them with listening to their story. Engage them with some of the questions that you now know. What do you see the process of reincarnation to be? Where are you at in your journey of your own samsara? Talk about this in terms of their own religion, and you've got some terms that now you know a little bit about to be able to talk through some of those things. All right, I'm going to take some final questions. It's 7:34. And by the way, I just want to give some kudos. Wendy Robinson, the biggest cowboy fan I know, is here tonight. So if you're watching on video and you didn't come because you're a Cowboys fan, I need you to understand Wendy Robinson was here tonight, and I'm very impressed by that. All right, a few questions and we'll be done for tonight. There was a couple, Derek Ian, I'm going to repeat the question for the video, so bear with me on that.
So I was going to ask, from a non-Hindu and non-Indian descent standpoint, I know we can't stereotype, do they see us as a particular caste while we share with them in the States, and versus geographically while we are there in India, do they use the same system
to view outsiders? Okay, so the question is, when you're in India and you're among Hindus, do they view you as a particular caste? In my own personal experience, again with my son-in-law's family, no. So they view you as wholly other. You don't hold to a caste system. Now, what they might look at is our class system of upper middle, lower middle, whatever, poor. They might look at that as similar to their caste system, but I do not believe that they would impose the caste system upon you and view you as a certain type of person. That's not been my experience, but a great question. And a great question you can use. Craig?
places to drink, and it kind of reminds me of slaves. So are the Dalits, in some ways, are they parallel to slaves?
They were till 1944.
Oh, okay.
They were not even considered human. But the Constitution of 1944, which Gandhi had a huge part in getting them to rewrite it in the way that they did, or to write it in the way that they did, they were then viewed as human beings and of that lowest caste. But to your point, both Shudras are viewed as the conquered people. And so before there were Dalits, the Shudras were actually glad the Dalits came around, because that had made them somebody lower than them. It's the reason that Arkansas is thankful for Mississippi in the educational system. That's basically it. We're glad there's somebody that's lower than us, right? Okay, but the whole idea is this aspect of that they were the lowest caste, but absolutely there is a pressure down on the system. All right, Franklin, question?
So, Christmas has kind of gone in like a lot of things. Has Christmas gone into like any part of Hinduism?
Okay, great point. So in the West, so as Hindus come here, absolutely Christmas is seen as a cultural holiday in which gifts are given. It's actually done within Judaism as well. So a lot of the cultures that come to the United States then do exhibit ideas of Christmas. But there was one of these holidays, Dussehra, which happens in, I think it was the one in October, that where gifts are exchanged. So the question is, did our exchanging of gifts kind of influence Dussehra to become a time within Hinduism of giving gifts, or was it the other way around? So I don't know the answer to that, but it's a great question. But culturally, Hindus who come here tend to practice holidays that are American holidays as well. So great question, really good. Terry Phillips.
If you go to India and with this message, then more than likely you're going to be encountering the Dalit and the level just above by sheer numbers.
By sheer numbers. Yeah, you are typically in India, according to Raj. First time I'd ever heard that and really thought about it, but it makes sense that you're going to typically encounter Shudras and Dalits in India. That's not the question, I'm just restating.
So, having said that, you're going to encounter that lower two castes of society. My feeling is that in the West, in the United States, you have a greater opportunity, and you witness the guy that lives next door to be dealing with someone in a much higher caste system.
That's possible. That is possible, and even potentially likely. Because although this is what's very fascinating about the Hindu culture and about Indians as a whole, there has always been a desire of upward mobility out of India. And so in my particular family, there was a movement to Africa, and then from Africa to England, and England to the United States. And just like we've seen, the families that I'm talking about bought hotels in a little West Texas town where you probably grew up, Terry Phillips. And therefore, that was a means by which they continued to become upwardly mobile. The other thing that you see common Hindus doing is they pool money and resources within the family. So it's family money. Now you have to pay each other back, and it leads to hard feelings if you don't, but there's family pooled money. But to Terry's question, what he's saying is, in the United States, do we typically see that it's the upward third of the caste system that do move out? And I would say that's probably a higher likelihood, but I have no research to back that up.
Thinking about your message,
Yeah.
the questions that you're asking, the message of suffering, the message of what is your need, because in a American upper middle class neighborhood, sometimes it's very difficult to detect need even in conversation, just because it's becoming so monolithic culturally. We're pretty well off.
Yes. Yes.
I'm just wondering, you learn a lot in India, and you want to bring something back. What is that you've learned and then can apply to a different caste?
Yeah. So the other part of that is many of the Hindus who live in the United States, they are still tied many of them will have a family home in a village that they're paying someone else to care for in their village, so that when they go back home, they have a place that's theirs to stay. So even though that's the other thing I would just remind us, that even though there is kind of a monolithic culture here that is upwardly mobile and everyone looking like they're in a higher class, when they go back home, they reassert some of those same things. But I can also tell you that when they go back home, they're also viewed as the rich uncle from America, to do that. Zach?
So, the video mentioned segregation between the classes, right? Classes of people. So, when you go on mission or as disciples, you go over there, if you interact with the lower class, does that prevent you from interacting with upper class later?
Well, so,
Because you can't even share the same well, right?
right,
You go up and you approach somebody,
yeah,
handshake,
it could taint that viewpoint.
or does it look like frowned upon?
Yeah, it's probably frowned upon in.
I saw who you were talking to yesterday.
Yeah, exactly. And so again, that ability to, when you're in India and you're operating between different castes, obviously in the church, the whole part of India that's bringing this back together is that you're breaking those caste barriers, which, by the way, that's what Buddhism does. Buddhism was incredibly popular among Hindus. Why? Because it disavowed the caste system and made women much more accessible. It made people much more accessible to the religion itself. You can imagine just how popular it was, just getting rid of that one factor. So you certainly are going to see it. But keep in mind, in India, you not only have some Christianity, but you have Islam as well. Now, the current Prime Minister, Modi, which is a big friend of Trump's in this, is, again, trying to eliminate Christianity and Islam from India and making it totally Hindu, because that is India first, is trying to keep that culturally based system within India. So what he's trying to do is get rid of all of these other groups so that they can revert back to some of these systems that are holistically Hindu. So the time will tell whether that works or not. We'll do 2 more questions and then we'll get done early here. So, Richard?
So you just brought up politics. As they try to make this a radically Hindu society,
Right?
how does that mesh with the growth of India economically in the world?
I think it's going to be a problem. How does it mesh? How does this idea to revert India back to a holistic Hindu society? I do not think it fits well with an outside economy. And so that's one of the reasons why I think it's going to be very difficult for him to continue to do this and continue to shut out Western organizations that are Christian. But he's done that with World Vision. He's done that with Samaritan's Purse. He's done that with large organizations. But I think there's going to be a reverberating effect in the long run. So, all right, one more. Any pressing question? All right. Christina Brown, you have the last question.
Okay, so I guess typically, how do people of Hindu faith normally respond to Christianity if they do know that you're Christian, or other religions born from more historical context versus this philosophical context that they're born from, or it's just a theoretical migration that you explained? So
Yep.
how do they normally address or welcome?
So 2 ways that I would say about that. Number one, the more Americanized a Hindu is, the less they're likely practicing. I'm seeing that firsthand, okay? 2nd, 3rd, 4th generations practicing less, and less. So that's one aspect of that. In other words, you may now know a little bit more about Hinduism than that they will know about Hinduism in some ways. And even if they do, they may not be practicing Hindus. So that's one thing. The other thing is, because they're seekers, they're very open to talk with you about that. What they're not willing to do is hear maybe our exclusivistic claims Things like, you probably don't want to lead with Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through me. You want to engage their thoughts and their processes and help them see a pathway, because the one thing that we discovered, Zach and I had a great conversation after last week, and I'm trying to remember all the points that you brought up, Zach. Do you remember some of those?
Yeah, I was mentioning that
Now I remember.
outside of glorifying God, it seems very similar.
There seem to be some similarities in this aspect of that you want to lose the Atman, the individualism, into the Brahman. There's a lot of Christianity themes in that. We want to die to ourselves, right? We want to lose more of ourself into who God is. There are some similarities which make great points to talk about. But the end goal of Hinduism with those points is that they lose all of their individuality into the deity. The aspect for us is the reason why we would do that. The reason why they're doing it is different than our reason, that our ultimate goal is to glorify a singular deity. The reason we want to come to the end of ourselves is so that he receives glory, not us. And so the motivation is vastly different. So coming back to Christina's question, the whole aspect of this is that they are seeking. There's very little hope in these lower castes of them doing anything to get out of this particular caste, certainly in their lifetime or in multiple lifetimes. So the idea of freedom, the idea of finding freedom in Christ is very much, they are open to the discussion of that and talking about it. But it's going to take time, because keep in mind, when we're sharing our faith across cultures, what it means is they are losing a huge part of their identity. If they choose Christ, they're losing a huge part of their personal identity, because it's tied to their family and it's tied to their culture. And it's just wise for us to be reminded of that, and that instant gratification of us of checking our belt or putting a notch in our belt that someone else came to know Christ. The idea is, let's be in the long haul, the relationship of where this goes. Okay? Next time we're going to jump into one of these reform movements of Buddhism. And so again, we'll be talking through that. So hope that you'll join us next time. The Cowboys are all ready. No, I'm just teasing. I don't know. I have no idea. No. Do not put that down. Some of these people will get very angry if you give them any information about this. All right. Thank you guys so much for being here.